It's harvest season for California's largest cash crop, marijuana. Valued at more than $11 billion, it's worth more than the state's grape and almond industries combined. California grows more pot than any place in the country. 3 years ago, voters approved a ballot measure called Prop 64 in California. It made marijuana legal for anyone over the age of 21. Advocates said a regulated pot industry would push out the black market and generate more than $500 million a year for the state. So has it worked? Not quite. We spent a week in a region of California that should be rolling in profits, the Emerald Triangle. What Napa is to wine, the Triangle is to weed. Its Mediterranean climate and rich soil are famous for producing some of the highest quality marijuana in the world. This might look like a Home Depot, but it's a pot processing plant, and every one of those buckets is full of marijuana. At the height of production, this room is the biggest legal pot stash in the country.
How much cannabis is in this room?
There's several thousand pounds.
Several thousand pounds?
Yes, tens of thousands, actually.
Okay.
Mikey Steinmetz runs the Flowcana factory. It packages weed from legal, state-regulated farms in the Emerald Triangle to be shipped and sold around California to licensed stores. There is nothing like this anywhere else in the pot industry.
This is like Willy Wonka stuff, right?
Yeah, we've been called that before, the Willy Wonka of weed.
So did you have to create and come up with all this stuff?
Everything.
Yeah.
And that's what the hardest part is, that like the technology and innovation is just starting to enter the space.
Forget those stereotypes about stoners. Some of his workers came from Apple and Google. They precisely weigh joints, inspect buds like gems, and package it to look more like high-end cosmetics than cannabis.
Oh, wow.
It's a different, this is Pineapple Wonder. Does it smell pineapple-y?
Yeah.
Steinmetz raised $175 million in just 1 year to get this off the ground. But despite all that, all along the supply chain, we found it's been far from a gold rush.
Is it a windfall? Are you all of a sudden rich? Are you making tons of profit?
No, candidly, like the regulated market has been a fraction of what everybody expected it to be.
Why?
The retail market has been very slow to roll out.
That's a nice one for sure.
The slow rollout is because of the strict limits on opening pot shops in California. Although Prop 64 legalized marijuana across the state, it gave towns and cities the power to decide if pot businesses can open locally. 80% said, not in my town.
So we have less retailers than we do in Oregon, for example, in a state that's, orders of magnitude larger.
Say that again, you have less retailers.
There's less retailers in California than there are in the state of Oregon.
And remember, California growers can only legally sell their marijuana in California. And licensed stores like this one in the Emerald Triangle are rare.
Give me a sense of kind of who the customers are who are walking in right now.
Our demographic is over 60. That is
Really?
Yes. Yeah, we get a.
Are they old hippies or are they grandparents with joint pain?
I would say they're both.
Yeah.
But there's not enough stores like this that sell marijuana legally, and there's way too much of it being grown. California grows 11 million more pounds than it can consume a year. Prices have crashed. It made things even more difficult for legal businesses like Flowcana.
There's an insane surplus of marijuana.
For sure.
Is it possible that there are too many growers, that we're producing too much weed in California?
Yeah, I mean, historically, California has been the supply of the nation, right? It's simply just the numbers don't add up.
It's also not adding up for licensed pot farmers in the Emerald Triangle. We drove up what locals call the $1 Million Highway into the heart of pot country. For decades, pot farmers have hauled their weed on this winding, remote road. A lot of it grown on family farms like Casey O'Neill's. They've been here since the 70s.
Welcome to the farm.
Thank you so much.
He has just 45 marijuana plants. He calls them his ladies, and they're tucked between his rows of vegetables.
All the cannabis in this row is Strawberry Valley. We've got char.
O'Neill, who spent time in jail for cultivating marijuana before it was legal, was one of the first to get a license after Prop 64 passed.
I grow cannabis because I really love it. I like to consume it. I like to be around it. It's something that provides my being and consciousness with tremendous love and support.
But his being and consciousness is getting strangled by red tape and a laundry list of requirements that don't make sense to growers, like weighing marijuana leaves, which is the part of the plant you don't smoke and can't get you high.
I must take all of the leaf that comes off the plant, I must weigh it, I must record the weight, and I must put it in a locked compost facility. So it's just like, Big Brother has some funny ideas.
Because what's the worry with the leaves?
It's
If you can't smoke the leaf, why does it matter?
Exactly.
Then there's the cost of operating legally. A major reason, O'Neill says, farmers he knows have decided to keep growing and selling marijuana illegally.
For most people out here, the opportunity to participate does not exist. The barriers to entry are too high, the costs are too high, the skill sets are too low. The flip side of it is people are not going to jail for cannabis.
And what's the cost to you?
So when you factor in consulting fees, I just did a back of the napkin calculation, and over the last 3-4 years, I'm well over $50,000 into it.
$50,000 for what, permits?
For permits for consulting, $2,500 a year for the water board discharge permit. It's $750 a year for the pond permit. It's $1,350 application fee to the county, plus another $675 when they actually give you the permit annually.
For a farm this size?
For the smallest farm that there is, and that's one of the problems is that.
So what does that do to your profits?
What profits?
You're not making any money right now?
No.
Really?
Absolutely not.
So where's the money being made in California? It turns out, in the very place legalization was supposed to destroy, the black market, which often operates out of storefronts like this in strip malls around the state. Those unlicensed shops don't have to pay for state and local permits and can sell marijuana much cheaper because they don't charge customers marijuana taxes, which can reach as high as 45%. So it's cheaper and easier to buy pot on the black market, which is 3 times larger than the legal one.
Unlike other industries, we have this kind of in the shadows, unspoken about competitor, right? And so it's not like California is fully raging, fully legal. Really, we're building to a fully regulated state, but we're certainly not there yet.
To see the roots of the black market in the Emerald Triangle, it helps to get high. Our guide was Mendocino County Sheriff Tom Allman. He's been chasing marijuana growers for 35 years.
Wow, this is a big operation.
Oh my goodness, this guy's gonna make millions of dollars.
Allman told us those white canopies belong to illegal marijuana growers undercutting California's legal pot industry.
See all those shiny straight things? Those are all marijuana growers.
How do you know they're not like tomatoes?
Because they're hidden in the woods. Look right here. I know those are not tomatoes, okay? There's 12 of them right there. I can guarantee you those are not tomatoes.
We were surprised they weren't camouflaged. Allman explained since Prop 64 and the legalization of marijuana, the black market suppliers try to blend in with legal pot farmers, sometimes on the same property.
So the backers of Prop 64 said 3 things, right?
Okay.
First, they said, we're going to raise $500 million in tax revenue. Has that happened?
No.
They
No.
said it's going to eliminate the black market. Has that happened?
The black market has greatly increased.
Has increased.
Absolutely.
And they said that this would now allow police officers like you to focus on other things.
I'm looking forward to that day.
Right now, his deputies are busy. There's so much illegal weed in areas that are so remote, they have to haul it away by helicopter. Allman says he only has the manpower to get rid of about 10% of it. So what happens to the rest? We learned much of it is being smuggled east to the 39 states where pot is still illegal and prices are 3 times higher than in California.
We've heard these reports from state police that say they're seeing larger shipments of marijuana moving east from California. Have you heard about this?
So probably once a week, we get a call. It's usually some trooper back east, at 3 in the morning who stopped a car for not having a tail light. Says, you won't believe it, we got 35 or 40 pounds.
That's on the low end. Throughout the year, we spoke to highway patrols across the center of the country. They shared photos of hundreds of pounds of pot they've intercepted. This 300-pound load was in Missouri. This trailer in Idaho carried 800 pounds, and 3,400 pounds were found in this haul in Texas. Since Prop 64 was implemented, We were told by highway patrols in 6 states that they've seized up to 3 times more pot on their roads.
Did this all happen too fast?
Oh my goodness, of course it did. It happened way too fast. For the black market, it's been a gold rush. I'm not saying that anybody at the organizers of Prop 64 intended this to happen the way it happened. That, they just wanted to decriminalize marijuana. But people have taken advantage.
Allman explained that Californians have little appetite to prosecute marijuana crimes, so he's had to get creative to go after the black market.
If I took someone in front of a jury for growing 1,000 plants illegally, no permits, no anything, I am telling you there is no way in hell I'm going to get a conviction on cultivation of marijuana. Marijuana on its face is part of our social fabric. But if that same grower was stealing water and using pesticides and rodenticides and taking water from the river, that jury's going to hang him.
Most of you already know where the target is. It's about 20 miles north of here.
To see that strategy at work, we went on a marijuana raid where agents from the Department of Fish and Wildlife were leading the way.
Nick, Aaron's left from 1 out.
They took us down a dusty, bumpy road deep in the Emerald Triangle. Their agents had been hiding in a forest for days, staking out an illegal grow. With their guns out, they went in.
You have the right to remain silent and refuse to answer any questions.
As cops questioned 2 workers, others went row by row, chopping down 1,000 plants. Scientists checked for illegal pesticides and documented how water was being stolen from a creek. Those violations, which could result in fines up to $40,000 a day, may turn out to be the most effective weapon against black market growers.
Who would have thought that when we write a search warrant and we go out and serve it, we would bring a biologist with us? Now, it's as important to us as bringing a gun.
Illegal grows now are manifesting. They're getting bigger. They're becoming more stubborn, more acute.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, who was a strong supporter of Prop 64, has said it could take 7 years to get past the growing pains and stomp out the black market. He's called in the National Guard to help by ordering units that were assisting the Border Patrol near Mexico to move north to the Emerald Triangle, where Casey O'Neill grows his pot.
So what happens if the National Guard shows up and here come the helicopters descending on the hills of the Emerald Triangle?
It's the same as it ever
What
was.
happens 6 months later?
What happens the day after they leave? People replant.
Casey O'Neill may be right. 6 weeks after that raid we went on, cops went back to the exact spot and found 1,100 brand new marijuana plants.
Visit Colorado these days and you can smell change in the air. It's the scent of legal marijuana for recreational use. If you're a resident 21 or older, you can walk into a state-licensed store and buy up to an ounce of pot. Tourists are limited to a quarter ounce. Colorado has allowed medical marijuana since 2001, but in 2012, voters amended the state constitution to allow recreational pot and gave the government 1 year to make it work. Colorado's governor calls it the most ambitious social experiment of the 21st century. 3 other states also have approved recreational pot, but none has gone further or faster into the legal retail weed business than Colorado. The experiment just hit the 1 year mark, and we wanted to know how it's going. So we headed to Denver, the epicenter of a marijuana industry that's now in full bloom. Welcome to the Mile High City, where marijuana, long a symbol of the counterculture, now is just a part of everyday culture. It's a Thursday night in downtown Denver, and we were invited to a marijuana food and wine pairing catering to young professionals. You might expect to see the band toking up, but here, everybody is. The food is sprinkled with marijuana, the wine infused with a strain called Killer Queen. Bud tender Leo Denave selected it for the evening.
Because of the mellowness of the strain, there isn't any kind of anxiety attached to it. So that's why we have such a crowd of happy and fantastic people. And what we're doing there with that machine is it creates smoke that is cooled to -10 degrees. And that smoke is then blown into this glass. And that allows the wine to open up and really bring in the fruit-forward qualities of it.
Those who might remember pot from the 70s, the marijuana grown and sold in Colorado today is up to 10 times stronger. There's a healthy appetite for the Rocky Mountain High and no shortage of stores to supply the demand. There's the Corner Store in Denver.
173 even.
A high-end boutique in Aspen, right around the corner from Prada and Gucci. Colorado has licensed more than 300 recreational dispensaries so far, ringing up an estimated $288 million in sales, $37 million in tax revenue.
This is a lot of pot. This is industrial scale. How
It
many
is.
rooms like this do you have?
When we're fully finished with our construction, we'll have 12 like this.
Meg Sanders is a new breed of cannabis CEO, driven to push marijuana into the mainstream. A suburban mother of two, she left a private equity firm to run Mindful, a chain of 4 retail stores that sells recreational and medicinal pot.
All of this is legal. That's just mind-blowing.
It is.
Meg, did you ever think you would be here doing this?
No, never in a million years. I was working in a small financial office, and it just wasn't a lot of upward growth. And what better opportunity than to jump into a fledgling industry, something that we'll never see again in our lifetime.
Her 44,000 square foot marijuana factory is cutting edge. Automated water and nutrient systems feed the plants. Lighting mimics the seasons so plants can be harvested year-round. All this in a warehouse right across the street from a Denver police station. 60 Mindful employees cultivate, trim, and package up to 500 pounds of marijuana every month.
This is not somebody's backyard. This is not some stoner's basement. This is a big business.
This is industrial agriculture. Absolutely. Commercial grow right here.
Which is why she recruited Philip Haig, known in the trade as a master grower. He used to cultivate flowers on an industrial scale in Texas, but his true passion is pot.
What do you bring to the table here?
Efficiencies on the grow side. I treat this building more like a large-scale tomato greenhouse than your average cannabis grow. So.
But these ain't tomatoes.
These are definitely not tomatoes. It's a very specialized plant.
And you are personally familiar with your wares?
Most definitely. Yes, sir.
All of this still is illegal at the federal level. The Justice Department is watching closely. The feds say they won't intervene as long as Colorado's recreational pot doesn't fall into the hands of kids or criminals or cross state lines. With marijuana's growing acceptance in Colorado, Sanders says she's comfortable as a cannabis capitalist.
I have a massive engineering feat for you.
Her 23-year-old son Elijah works with her at Mindful. She says parents at her daughter's middle school seem more curious than critical of her business.
Do you have any concerns that your job is sending the wrong signal to your 13-year-old daughter?
I'm not concerned about that.
At all?
I'm not. This isn't carte blanche. Oh, because I work here, everybody should have access to it, and that includes her. We have very good conversations about it. She knows. She knows.
I mean, you say you're a business person. I think some parents would look at this and say, she's just peddling drugs.
I can tell you that the drug dealer, illegal drug dealer on the corner in any state in this nation isn't carding, isn't checking your ID, isn't making sure you have a medical marijuana card or you're over 21. This industry does it every day. The stats show it. We've done a phenomenal job.
Mindful expects to rake in $18 million this year, but it's not easy money. Colorado requires every plant grown by a licensed operator to be tracked from seed to sale. Each one has a bar-coded radio frequency ID tag and is logged into a statewide database. Cameras watch it all. The goal is to keep every bud and bit off the black market. Greenwood Village Police Chief John Jackson isn't sold.
Law enforcement is really trying to do the right thing here. It's different, and it's requiring a mind change or shift on our part.
Jackson is president of the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police. He says there's still illegal pot on the streets from underground dealers who don't have to levy 28% in state taxes.
There's a common belief that by legalizing it, you will get rid of the black market. I can resoundingly say that the black market is alive and doing well.
It's still cheaper to buy it from the dealer on the street than to buy it in the store.
Certainly. You know, we've created an entire industry here, and I'm going to be honest with you. There are some very responsible people that are involved. And it's like anything else in society. You've got a few people that are really making it hard for the others, and maybe use Colorado as a platform to simply provide their marijuana to the rest of the country.
This is what he's talking about. In October, Denver police and the DEA raided several warehouse operations that were allegedly growing marijuana destined for out of state. Neighbors Nebraska and Oklahoma are suing to have the U.S. Supreme Court declare Colorado's recreational pot market unconstitutional, claiming marijuana is crossing their borders. It's too early to say if other problems are taking root. Colorado is just now starting to collect and analyze data on pot's impact on the state.
I do worry about if we are irreparably harming Colorado, and it's something that will take years to suss out.
This baby-faced 31-year-old, Andrew Friedman, is Colorado's marijuana czar. He's a Harvard law grad, hand-picked by Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper to oversee the rollout of legalized recreational pot.
There is no roadmap. I mean, you guys are racing ahead at, 1,000 miles an hour, and you're trying to work this out on the fly. How do you do that?
It's an unbelievable challenge. Within 1 year, we wanted to get our culture up to speed. What is the right amount to imbibe or to smoke and drive? What's appropriate around kids? What's appropriate in public? Society had never weighed in on these things before. Okay, anything else on caregivers? Black market, gray market, where we're going on it?
He regularly calls together the department heads of revenue, health, education, all the state agencies involved with marijuana, trying to balance the demands of the people with public safety and the law.
It's legal here, but outside of Colorado, it's still illegal. It's a federally illegal drug. How do you square those two?
Well, it is a round peg in a square hole. It takes everybody being creative in ways they haven't been creative before, and knowing that at any time the federal government could come and shut us down and tell us that what we're doing is illegal in their eyes.
You still think that's possible?
Sure. It's completely possible that in a few years somebody comes around and says, a new president says, we are not okay with you doing this.
They know they're under a microscope. That's why Colorado was quick to act when it bit into trouble with edibles, marijuana candies, cookies, and other infused foods. Just 3 months into legalization, a 19-year-old college student visiting Denver leapt to his death from a hotel balcony after eating a pot-laced cookie. The coroner's report noted marijuana intoxication as a significant contributing factor.
I think one of the things we didn't see coming was that people were going to overdose on edibles. And we're not going to try to hide that problem. New rules and regulations came out faster than I think you ever see state government do something.
New rules placed immediate limits on the amount of THC, marijuana's major psychoactive ingredient, allowed in edibles, and required new labeling detailing the potency of each serving. But the biggest cloud over the industry is banking. As long as the federal government continues to count pot proceeds as illegal drug money, most banks won't touch it. So Colorado's billion-dollar marijuana industry is conducted almost entirely in cash. That's why Meg Sanders keeps a 2-ton safe.
So your payroll was in cash?
Payroll,
taxes,
rent, taxes, licensing fees, Home Depot, vendors, you name it, our electrician.
All
absolutely.
in cash.
Absolutely. From a public safety standpoint, it's definitely the #1 issue that this industry faces.
You want to guarantee that a fledgling industry becomes corrupt and becomes populated with gang activity, make it all cash, right? That's as old as Al Capone, right? Cash creates corruption.
Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper says a partial solution might be a new state-chartered cannabis credit union. He's urging the federal government to approve it. Still, despite the problems, Governor Hickenlooper says he's encouraged by the rollout of this green experiment Colorado voters wanted.
In the beginning, you didn't think it was a good idea.
No, I opposed it. And I opposed it. I think even after the election, if I'd had a magic wand and I could wave the wand, I probably would have reversed it and had the initiative fail. But now I look at it and I'm not so sure I'd do that, even if I had such a wand. I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress and, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think we might actually create a system that can work.
All right, I will have an eighth of that.
Sure.
Meg Sanders says marijuana is good for business.
It's pretty groovy, dude.
And good for Colorado.
Are you seeing a marijuana effect on the economy here?
Absolutely. You can't find an empty warehouse in the city of Denver, really. I mean, you just can't. And then think of the ripple effect. I mean, we affect a ton of businesses, security, marketing, web hosting. We're a business just like anybody else. We have the same needs.
Today, you can walk into a mindful dispensary and buy a joint for $14.53. Business is good. Sanders is planning to expand.
We're saying, please trust us. We know we can do this right.
I do remember when this was rolled out, everyone thought the sky was gonna fall.
Still there. It didn't fall. And business is thriving, and the customers are still coming through the door. So clearly, if I'm looking at my business and I'm looking at those around me, the consumer is saying, yeah, this works.
After 40 years and $1 trillion, the nation has little to show for its war on drugs. Prisons are beyond crowded, and there's a new outbreak in the heroin epidemic. If it's time for a change, it would be hard to find a leader more different than Michael Botticelli. The president's new director of National Drug Control Policy isn't a cop. He's lucky he didn't go to jail himself. And we knew that things had changed the first time we used the nickname that comes with his job, the drug czar.
It's actually a title that I don't like.
Why?
Because I think it connotes this old war on drug focus to the work that we do. It portrays that we are clinging to kind of failed policies and failed practices in the past.
Are you saying that the way we have waged the war on drugs for more than 40 years has been all wrong?
It has been all wrong.
Blunt force didn't knock out the drug epidemic. 21 million Americans are addicted to drugs or alcohol, and half of all federal inmates are in for drug crimes.
We can't arrest and incarcerate addiction out of people. Not only do I think it's really inhumane, but it's ineffective, and it cost us billions upon billions of dollars to keep doing this.
So what have we learned?
We've learned addiction is a brain disease. This is not a moral failing. This is not about bad people who are choosing to continue to use drugs because they lack willpower. We don't expect people with cancer just to stop having cancer.
Aren't they doing it to themselves? Isn't a heroin addict making that choice?
Of course not. The hallmark of addiction is that it changes your brain chemistry. It actually affects that part of your brain that's responsible for judgment.
That is the essence of Michael Botticelli's approach. Addicts should be patients, not prisoners. He did it in Massachusetts as director of substance abuse services. There, his initiatives included a high school for teens in recovery and expanding drug courts like this one in Washington, D.C., where offenders can choose treatment over jail and the charges can be dropped.
You know that there are people watching this interview and they're saying to themselves, oh great, he wants to open the jails and let the drug addicts out.
Mm-hmm. I think we have to base our policy on scientific understanding, and we've had really great models and evaluated models to show that we can simultaneously divert people away from our criminal justice system without an increase in crime, and it actually reduces crime.
Botticelli pursues reform with the passion of the converted because he himself is recovering from addiction. Back in 1988, he was a university administrator whose car slammed into a truck. Botticelli was drunk. In truth, he'd been drunk for years.
Did you love drinking?
I would say that I probably had an unhealthy love affair with drinking. I grew up as this kind of insecure kid, kind of making my way. And, drinking took all of that away, and people drink and do drugs for a reason because it makes them feel good, until it doesn't anymore.
Is it true that after the accident you woke up handcuffed to a gurney?
I did. And, you think to yourself, how did I get to this point, in my life?
That point included imminent eviction from his apartment because the booze had washed away all the money.
A very wise judge said to me, Michael, you have two options. You can either get care for your drinking problem, or we can continue with criminal proceedings.
It was at that point that you walked into this church and went to the 12-step meeting down in the basement.
I did.
What was that first meeting like?
It's hard for me to talk about this, and not from a sense of sadness, from a sense of tremendous gratitude. This was the first time that I raised my hand and said that I was an alcoholic and that I had a problem. And what the miraculous thing about that movement is that people rally around you in ways, addiction is such an isolating incident in your life. You feel alone. And, when you admit and when you come into a fellowship like this, and people just surround you and say, we will help you, that you're not alone, that we've been through it before and you will get through it, just gives you such great hope.
He's been alcohol-free for 27 years. Today, he oversees a $26 billion budget across 16 government agencies. Just over half of the money goes to drug enforcement.
What do you say to those who argue, and there are many, that if you lock down the southern border, you solve the drug problem?
I think it's overly simplistic to say that any one single strategy is going to really change the focus and change the trajectory of drug use.
For example, he says the heroin crisis was created here at home.
We know one of the drivers of heroin has been the misuse of pain medication. If we're going to deal with heroin and heroin use in the United States, we really have to focus on reducing the magnitude of the prescription drug use issue.
Many pain drugs are opioids, like heroin, and the number of opioid prescriptions has risen from 76 million in 1991 to 207 million today.
We have a medical community that gets little training on pain, gets little training on addiction, and quite honestly has been promoting and continues to promote the overprescribing of these pain medications.
Some are born addicted. We met Botticelli at Massachusetts General, where Dr. Leslie Kersner weans infants off of opioids.
Just going to give him this little bit of morphine right in his cheek.
In the last decade, the number of expectant mothers on opioids has increased fivefold.
If they don't get the treatment, they could have a seizure, and that's what we really worry about.
But how does a person who is addicted to prescription pain medication find themselves on heroin?
Prescription drugs and heroin act in very similar ways on the brain. And, unfortunately, heroin, because of its widespread availability, is a lot cheaper on the streets of Boston and many places around this country.
Heroin is cheaper than prescription painkillers.
It is. A bag of heroin can be as cheap as $5, $10.
More than 120 Americans die of drug overdoses each day. That is more than car wrecks or gun violence. To save lives, Botticelli started an experiment in 2010 with the Quincy, Massachusetts Police. Lieutenant Patrick Glenn is head of narcotics.
When someone dies of an overdose, the community becomes very, very small. Everyone knows each other, even in a large city as ours. Just recently, in the past 4 to 6 months, some of our officers have lost children.
In a city of about 100,000 people, did I just understand you to say that some of your officers have lost children to drug overdoses?
Yes.
How many?
Two did. Two of them lost sons.
In what period of time?
Within the last 6 months.
Botticelli helped arm every Quincy officer with naloxone, a nasal spray antidote for overdose. Lieutenant Glenn saw it work on an unconscious addict.
Within about 45 seconds to a minute, they started to move around, their eyes flooded, and they began to sit up and speak.
Must have looked like a miracle.
It's surreal.
And they got to the victim in time due to a controversial innovation called the Good Samaritan Law.
One of the changes that came under Botticelli's administration was that someone involved in drugs, if there was an overdose, they could call 911 and they would not be arrested for having drugs on the premises.
Correct.
What difference did that make?
That opened the floodgates of people calling 911.
Today, 32 states have a similar 911 law, and naloxone is carried by more than 800 police departments. In Massachusetts, Botticelli helped make treating addiction routine health care, so patients can get their opioid treatments now in a doctor's office.
Things have been going really well for you. We'll figure out the path you can walk down to stay in recovery.
And today, the Affordable Care Act requires most insurance companies to cover addiction treatment.
I often say that substance use is one of the last diseases where we let people reach their most acute phase of this disorder before we offer them intervention. You've heard the phrase hitting bottom. Well, we don't say that with any other disorder. So the medical community has a key role to play in terms of doing a better job of identifying people in the early stages of their disease, in doing a better job at treating people who have this disorder.
Notice that word, disorder. Botticelli prefers it to addiction. He wants to lift the stigma by changing the language, as he did this past October in a rally on the National Mall.
We must choose to come out in the light and be treated with dignity and respect. So let's stop whispering about this disease.
Botticelli sees a model for the change in attitude in the gay rights movement, which he has also lived. He's been with his husband, David Wells, more than 20 years.
At what point were you comfortable talking about being a gay man?
Before I was comfortable talking about being an alcoholic.
The alcoholism was harder.
You know, even kind of feeling that moment of hesitation about saying that I'm in recovery and not about being a gay man shows to me that we still have more work to do to really destigmatize addiction.
But it's addiction to legal drugs, alcohol and tobacco, that kill the most Americans, over 500,000 a year. Botticelli does not believe in adding another drug to that cocktail with the legalization of marijuana.
You're not a fan?
I'm not a fan. What we've seen, quite honestly, is a dramatic decrease in the perception of risk among youth around occasional marijuana use. And they are getting the message that because it's legal, that there's no harm associated with it. So we know that about 1 in 9 people who use marijuana become addicted to marijuana. It's been associated with poor academic performance and exacerbating mental health conditions linked to lower IQ.
Botticelli worries the marijuana industry is quickly adapting Big Tobacco's playbook. In the 1990s, tobacco companies appealed to kids with flavored cigarettes and Joe Camel. Today, the nearly $3 billion marijuana industry promotes sweetened edibles and Buddy, a mascot for legalization.
You are never going to be able to talk all the states out of the tax revenue that will come from a burgeoning marijuana industry. It will just be too seductive.
You know, that's quite honestly my fear, is that states are going to become dependent on the revenue.
It becomes a codependency.
It becomes an addiction to, unfortunately, tax revenue that's often based on bad public health policy.
As for his own recovery, Botticelli says it gets easier, though he still attends those 12-step meetings that he called miraculous.
There are people watching this interview right now who are addicted to drugs, are alcoholics, and they cannot stop. And to them you say what?
That there's help, that there's hope, that there is treatment available. If I, in some small way, can help people to see that there is this huge, incredible life on the other side of addiction, I will feel accomplished in my job.